Good morning, everyone. After 5 years of therapy, the psychiatrist told his patient that at long last he was completely cured. He couldn't understand why his patient didn't look terribly happy, and so he said to the man, "What's wrong? I thought you would be ecstatic that you're now completely cured." And the man said to him, "Look at it this way. 5 years ago when I came to see you, I was Elvis Presley, but now I'm nobody." And I can't help wondering if that's a little bit like how Saul felt whenever he discovered that David was going to be made king. It had all started out so well for Saul. He had been God's chosen man and he seemed to rule well initially. But in battle, he didn't obey God. God had said to him to make sure that everything was destroyed. But because Saul feared man and was worried that the Israelites wouldn't be happy when they didn't get to experience any of the spoils of battle for themselves, so he held back some of the things. And when Samuel came to see Saul, he told him that no longer was Saul God's chosen king, but that a new king had been chosen. Saul, by and large, had rejected God. And God now rejects Saul, and he removes his hand of blessing from Saul. Is that not exactly what our society has done? Our society has introduced laws that are not only contrary to God's law, but are an actual offence to God. And it's as though our society has said, "We don't want you, God. We want to be able to decide what we do ourselves." Is it unfair then if God decides to remove his hand of protection and blessing from our society and indeed from our world? As an aside, listen to these words from Romans chapter 1. And it details for us what happens whenever we reject God and follow our own way. "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonouring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever." How accurately this describes our world today. But let's get back to our story. God sets aside his blessing from Saul and he chooses David to be king. And yet, even David's own father didn't particularly rate him. He referred to him in the Hebrew as being a hackathon. Today we might refer to that as being the runt of the pack. David's own father saw him as nothing, a mere shepherd out looking after the sheep. But this would be God's chosen shepherd of his flock. But David posed no real threat to Saul. That was until one particular day when David faced what we might see as being a pretty big problem. In fact, 9 feet of a problem to be precise. Goliath had been threatening the Israelites for some time and they were utterly terrified of him. And he had said to the Israelites, "Look, if one of you Israelites can come and beat me, then we Philistines will become your slaves." And the Israelites had been told that if Goliath were to win, well then the Israelites would become slaves to the Philistines. Paul Fritz suggests we need to get the right perspective. He says this: when Goliath came against the Israelites, the soldiers all thought, "He's so big we can never kill him." David looked at the same giant and thought, "He's so big I can't miss him." When he heard the voice of Goliath, instantly David knew what he had to do, because David's eyes were firmly on God. David even says in 1 Samuel 17 verse 47, "For the battle is the Lord's." As David went out with his slings and stones and Goliath fell in a heap on the ground, it was evident that David was the giant of faith and that Goliath was the dwarf in battle that day. That's what having our eyes fixed on God does. Everything else seems small by comparison. We Christians need to bring our world to the Lord in prayer. Now, I'm not talking merely about the coronavirus, but I'm talking about the souls of the people of this world. We need to plead their cause with God. We need to see that our God is great enough that he can save the souls of a world that is lost. That's how we need to see them. We need to see them as lost without Christ. You see, we are the ones who are called to stand in the gap, to plead their cause, that God would reach down and wondrously save them. And let's make sure about our motivation. Saul was motivated for himself and for what he could get and what he could have and for his safety and security. But David, at least at this stage, was motivated by God's glory. "The battle is the Lord's," said David. And let's pray for God's glory to be manifested through the saving of souls. Let's make it about him. And let's see that God is great and that man is small.